call the Cedar Falls City Council Committee of the Whole to order. We have two items on our agenda this evening. The first one is Washington Street construction project, and I think Dave Wickey's going to speak with us.
Okay, good evening, council, staff. So I've come back for this Washington Street reconstruction. Many of you may recall we presented this item at a committee of the whole presentation. It was, I think, is early August, and at that time we had asked for a motion to proceed forward with the design on this project, so we can continue with the final design and try to get this project moved forward. That motion failed at that time, so when that motion failed and there wasn't a secondary motion, staff was really left without any direction on how to proceed forward with the project at that time, so we kind of had to shelve it. But now we're back under direction to represent the information, and we're going to do something a little bit different, and I'll get to that at the end. All right, perfect, thank you. So some of this will be familiar to council that was here when I presented this last time, and for some of the council members that weren't here, maybe this will be new information. But I'll just kind of go through the slides here and let you know some of the background history and what led us to this point here. So. Washington Street from 6th all the way to 18th, as you're well aware, is a one-way street, and it goes, and it's stop controlled with stop signs at 12th and 18th, and then we also have the signal at 6th Street as well. Currently, this street is typical Cedar Falls residential type of street section. It's a 35-foot wide back-to-back curb and gutter with, all right, so is that better? All right. With sidewalk, 5-foot sidewalks on both sides of the street. It's a existing concrete street, and what we are proposing here for this project, I'll back up here. So this was a concept that was brought forward. This was back in January. We presented this at a meeting back then. This was our initial concept design for the reconstruction of Washington from 6th to 8th Street. At that time, we looked at a few different options to try to accommodate some parking for St. Patrick's School. So that's what the angled parking is showing there. And then there was some additional improvements to the intersections with the curb bump outs and the addition of stop signs with rapid flashing beacons. At that meeting, there was some questions and concerns that were brought up at that time. So I think it was decided at that meeting back in January to kind of table this at that time. And then the direction was to come back with a better plan, working with the stakeholders and try to get more approval that way. So that's what led us to that August meeting, and now here we are at this meeting. So from that August meeting, or between the January meeting and the August meeting, we met with the stakeholders several times, and we worked with them, and we come up with a concept that we felt at that time, with all the stakeholders giving us full support, a design that would accommodate to the best of our abilities everybody's needs. And some of those were the curb bulb outs, the addition of stop signs at the 7th Street intersection, and some addition of a student drop-off lane for parents to pull into that lane, drop their students off, and also the addition of a bus drop-off lane on 7th. Some of the advantages of this was, the curb bump outs would provide shorter, safer crossing distances at that intersection, along with the four-way stop sign with the LED flashers on those to improve safety at that intersection. And also part of our design for this was to convert this corridor from a one-way to a two-way. So this was the concept that we brought forward at that August meeting, and like I said, this is a schematic that shows the stop sign with the flashing LEDs. One of the big pluses for this was that it could be solar powered, and we can set a timer for those flashers on that stop sign to be timed anytime that we want. It wouldn't have to be restricted to just, flashing all the time. We could set it at the peak times for student drop-off and pickup, and then additionally, we could time it additionally for, services, for church services as well. This was the proposal and the enhancements to convert the one-way section on Washington from 6th to 18th, from one-way to two-way. And it shows, the addition of the stop control improvements at the intersection of 7th and some additional signage that we would have getting into that two-block section. And, we talked about some of the advantages of the two-way versus one-way. The data supports, and a lot of research that we had done supported the safety features of converting this corridor to a two-way. Some of the other things that we talked about was, in the staff's estimation or in the staff's recommendation to the council was the pros definitely outweighed the cons in doing this conversion. Some of the pros here is that increase the street circulation. The pedestrian crossings would be preferred, as drivers would tend to slow down as they were, both traveling each lane a direction. And let's see, two-way networks allow drivers to take the most direct routes. So anybody traveling that corridor, if they're coming back and traveling north, they wouldn't have to find an alternate route. They'd just be able to come straight up Washington if they were coming, especially all the way from 18th. One of the biggest advantages of having two-way conversion is that, it's intuitive as a driver to naturally drive on a roadway that's two-way. And then some of the other services that provided by the city would be, and post office also would help some of those operations as well. One of the biggest cons that we thought would happen would be some of the parking that was on Washington that the church would lose out on. But we were able to successfully work with the church, and we come up with some ideas to help them out. So that was the conversation that we had on the conversion and why we thought that was important. Getting back, I'm going to repeat, at the last time we presented this to the council, we had one motion, and this time we're going to ask for 3 separate motions. And I'll kind of read through all 3 separate motions, and then we can take one by one. So staff is recommending the first motion is to approve the design of the St. Patrick's School layout, which includes the bump outs and the relocation of the bus drop-off on 7th and the installation of the parent drop-off on Washington. Second recommended motion that we are asking is that we approve the conversion of the intersection from the current lighted intersection to the flashing four-way stop sign intersection that showed those, that had that timer on it and that flashing LED around it. And then the third and final recommendation, staff is asking for the approval of the Washington Street two-way conversion from one-way to a two-way conversion down the stretch of the corridor from 6th to 8th. So that is the presentation by and large, and I will stand for any questions that we have and go from there. So thanks for listening.
Thank you, Dave. Why don't we start the conversation? I don't think we, well, I guess we need to make a motion and then talk about each one. Is that what we're suggesting here?
Well, what we're asking for is three separate motions, a separate motion on each one of these items. So we can take them one at a time,
Okay,
if you would like.
we'll take a motion and then to have discussion. So is there a motion to approve item number 1, the design of St. Patrick's School layout?
I'll make that motion.
There's a motion.
Second.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Now we have some discussion, questions, and public can call in as well.
Sue had some questions.
Yeah, if you don't mind, bear with me a little bit. I wasn't here. I was in Texas at the original drawing on this. When you say design of St. Patrick's School layout, I'm looking at the concept January 20th, and then I'm looking at this proposed site layout.
Correct.
So on the concept January 2020, was the bus drop-off on 7th, or was it this one that it looks like is on Washington?
The bus drop-off, currently as it stands, is on Washington.
Okay, but yet on this proposed, so you're not talking about putting it on 7th?
So what we are talking about is working with the school and St. Patrick's Church. We working with them, the proposal was to move the bus drop-off onto 7th off of Washington. That allowed us to create that slip lane on Washington for the parent drop-off.
Okay, but if you approve the motion as with the design of St. Pat's School layout, is what I'm trying to get at, does that put this bus drop-off on 7th, or does it put it on Washington?
The approval of number 1 will have the bus drop-off on 7th and the student drop-off on Washington.
Okay, and on the student drop-off on Washington, would the only way, you can only go one way on that, I would assume.
As it stands
Otherwise,
currently,
cars
yes.
would be crossing.
Yeah.
So is that going to be marked one way? And would it be marked going north or south if you went with a two-way road?
So if the two-way conversion passes, that slip lane that is currently showed would be for parents dropping off their students. They'd be traveling south, and they would be able to get into that lane and drop off their kids.
Okay, which is the way it is now, which is southbound.
Right.
Okay, and if it's left a one-way, would that still be able to be built?
Yes, we would still be able to build that slip lane, but it does raise some concerns about double stacking both those lanes in the one-way direction, and parents still wanting to drop off their kids on the street and then crossing traffic to get to the school.
Is the only separation between this drop-off lane and the road a painted line, or is there a median, or just the painted line?
It's a painted median.
Okay, and the bump outs are the same either way, is that right? On
Correct.
the January plan and this one?
Yes, well, we modified the bump outs a little bit to, for those drop-off, for that drop-off area. So that changed the geometric design of the bump out somewhat.
Okay, but the bump outs are only on 7th Street, or on that intersection? There are none anywhere else on the corridor,
I believe there's bump outs on 6th too.
6th and 7th?
Just for clarification, Did you say that there's a painted median? It looks like on the map, there's a 2-foot section there.
It,
It may be helpful to go back to the
me go back
proposed sign layout.
yeah, let me see if I can get back to the slide.
Yes, that's a painted median.
Raised median. Raised median?
It's a painted median, 2-foot painted.
We did discuss about having that be a raised median, but that has its own challenges with maintenance and snow removal. So that's why we decided to just have it be a painted median.
I have a question.
I got a question.
Oh, okay, go ahead, Daryl.
Go ahead, Daryl.
To further the question that Sue proposed there on with the two-way street and the drop-off, and we talk about stacking, wouldn't it be safer if the parents knew that the traffic was only coming from one direction as you drop off kids, whether you're in the turn-off lane or in a hurry, maybe drop your kids off in the lane parallel to the turn-off lane, and then knowing that the other lane to the left would still be a one-way as well?
I think if I'm understanding your question correctly, Councilman, so you're saying if it remains a one-way and parents are encouraged to use that drop-off lane that we're showing on there, that potential still exists where, you know, parents still are going to stop in the middle of the street and drop their children off in the street and they have to cross traffic. So that's the biggest concern. If it's converted to a two-way, that concern lessens because traffic traveling north, you know, since it's just dedicated that lane to travel north, they wouldn't be able to stop or stack. They just have to keep moving. And they would eventually, you know, if they're accustomed, if that's what they're accustomed to doing now, obviously we would, you know, educate the public when, you know, as we move forward with this project, you know, we'd have a public input meeting and we'd educate the public on, you know, how this is going to function, how it's going to work. And so give people the opportunity and chance to get an idea and get used to negotiating that. I hope that kind of answers your question.
Well, in a sense, yes, but not really. I'm thinking of the one-way street behind Cedar Heights Elementary. It's one-way as well, very similar to this with dropping kids off on Hawthorne Street. And to me, it seems safer if I was a parent dropping off kids that I knew traffic was going all one way with this turnout in here. That's just my comment. So,
Thanks, Daryl. Councilman Sires?
Yeah, it looks to me like we're voting on this wrong. It looks to me like first we should decide whether we're going to keep it a one-way or if we're going to convert it to a two-way. Of course, I'm in favor of keeping it a one-way street so we can have the parking, and all of the people at the church that I've talked to have all said they want it kept one way. The only one who was saying it was okay to make it the other direction was the father, as far as I can understand from all these people. I've had many calls of people on Washington Street, and they all want it kept one way. So I think we should keep that one way, have our big intersection lights, and then worry about the different design at St. Patrick's School last. It's almost like this is trying to get us to jump off the cliff by number 1, number 2, and then number 3. Let's start and have our first discussion be whether we make it a one-way or two-way, and I'm for keeping it a one-way as we voted before, except we had the absence of Susan. It was 3-3. So that's where we started, and from what I understand from Daryl is he wanted to move ahead on this project as a one-way after that vote. The vote that we had that was 3-3 with Susan's vacant chair said we were going to keep it one way. Now all of a sudden we get this back and this is just a rehashing of the same thing. We went through all the thing about the 700 crossings, kitty corner across that street. I wouldn't care if we even put down train barricades. I want to keep those kids safe. I'm not for making this a two-way street. I think it's crazy. You just doubled the amount of traffic. Then the kids have to look both directions. But to start up here at the bottom, or start at the top, we should start at the bottom and decide whether we're going to have it be a two-way street conversion or we're going to keep it as the one-way. And then we should decide whether we're going to have the stoplights or not. This is just all backwards. But the main thing is to keep that a one-way street. And that's what Daryl had called for last time. He said, I'd like to have this looked at as a one-way street with the improvements. But this is just the same thing that we had before that we voted 3-3 with Susan's vacancy. So I guess I'd like to vote first on, and I know Mark's made the motion, but it seems more realistic to start out whether we're going to have it be a two-way street or a one-way street and then go from there. That's all.
Could I jump in for a little bit of clarification on?
Sure, Chase.
Can you bring up the recommended motions again, David? It doesn't matter what order we look at them in, regardless. The goal of tonight is to, previously, there is no staff direction to design Washington Street. We have a limited window here with Main Street and the CIP coming up. Cannot have two streets that are parallel with each other under construction at the same time. So the goal of tonight is if one of these options fails, as an example, number one, if the motion of number one fails, staff will be directed to design the street without those elements in number one. So it would not include the bump outs and the relocation of the bus drop off. So basically the cross section of Washington would be as it is today. So that's the goal of tonight, regardless, of what motion we look at, number two first or number three first. The goal is to get some direction to move forward, to bring some plans forth to council so we can get this street under construction next year. This is kind of we go into design phase in right now in November. Generally, lettings happen in January or February for the best prices for contractors. So we're kind of at our last window here without waiting 3 to 5 years.
Well, my point is, we want to keep that a one-way. And I just want to vote that through, and then you can put it on your approval plan so that we don't bring it back up and revote it all the time. We had a 3-3 with Susan's vacancy. Let's just vote that first, and to say that staff is not pushing it to make it a two-way is wrong, because that's all we've heard. We don't have in our packet anything that shows this as a one-way. And then here's my favorite one. We got a stop sign with a flashing solar thing on there, like that's better than great big stoplights. I mean,
Okay.
holy cow, do you think you're going to sell that with this? My whole fight has always been with staff.
Okay.
I try and be calm, but Daryl had said before he wanted to look at this with the upgrades
Thank you,
as a one-way.
Mr. Sayers.
Okay, thank you.
Susan,
Quick comment, Mr. Mayor, or
Daryl,
Frank?
I was going to let Susan speak first. She had
Okay,
her
sure.
hand up already.
Okay.
Okay, my question was, if we wanted to look at, I like the 7th Street bus loading, and I do like the parent drop-off, but I don't like the idea of, if the road's two directions, cars going north and doing a U-turn to pull into that school drop-off and crossing the southbound lane. Versus if it was, I guess, all one way, all 3 lanes, meaning the 2 lanes of traffic and the drop-off would all be going the same way. Are you saying that can't be done, or only with the way the motion's written? Can we not put in the 7th Street bus drop-off and the parent drop-off and the bump outs? Do they not work if it's a one-way?
As an example, I'll run through all 3 motions real quick, just so it clarifies some things. For example, if motions 1 and 2 pass, that would mean the bus drop-off is relocated on 7th. Washington Street now has a slip lane for parent drop-off. That would be motion number 1. Motion number 2 would be including stop signs with the flashing red lights on a timer system, in which we've worked with the school on, and feels, both the school and the church feels this is the safest crossing method for their kids as many times as they cross a day. If that were approved, we'd incorporate that into design, and if motion number 3 fails, the street would remain a one-way. We would design it with all those elements in 1 and 2. 3 fails, it would remain a one-way, and we'd design it that way.
But if 1 and 2 fail and you go to number 3, you're saying you just build it the way it is today and there's no opportunity to move a bus drop-off on 7th or to put in a parent drop-off? And what my question is, why can't there be maybe a 4 where we could add those 2 elements? I mean,
These
that's what I'm
are
trying to
just
ask.
recommended motions, so if you would like to make a different motion to include them both, you can entertain that.
Okay, well, that's what I'm trying to get to, is it possible to do that with the bump outs, or does the whole engineering of it not work?
Can you state your question again with the parent drop-off? I'm not sure I'm following.
I'm trying to question whether if the road was a one-way, and could you still then have the bus drop off on 7th Street and do the parent drop off and do your bump outs? Does it work? Does it engineer out that way? Or does it not engineer out that way because?
We might have to make some slight changes in the bump out alignments and kind of geometric, some small stuff, but, you know, there's some safety concerns which we brought up before about, you know, you got 2 travel lanes in one direction. Obviously, the parent's not gonna get in line, the 6th car in line at the north end of the school to drop their child off. They're gonna get in the furthest eastbound lane, go all the way up to the stop sign or signal, whatever it may be, to drop their child off there. So you'll have multiple stacking lanes in which they'll be trying to use. But so there's some safety concerns there. But to answer your question, yes, we could make it work.
Okay. I was just thinking that would stop them from doing U-turns in the middle of the street to get into the drop-off.
Mr. Mayor.
My impression was that the first 2 motions could be passed and it would work either on a one-way or a two-way. Is that correct?
Correct.
And we need to make a decision so that you guys can get your work done so it doesn't conflict with another. So I would suggest we go ahead and make our motions in the order they're provided and see how it goes. I know, Daryl, you still want to say something, but I came into this with the idea that 1 and 2 were improvements that everybody could agree with and that it would work on either a one-way or a two-way. And I trust our engineers. They have done their research. I know we all do our research as well, but we don't get paid for it, and they do. So I think the recommendations have been well thought out. They understand the politics of it. It may not be a two-way, but we've got 3 recommendations that we've already got a motion on the table. I think we ought to.
Yeah, that was kind of the
forward.
question I was trying to get to is do they work whether it's two-way or one-way?
And that's my impression that it would.
Okay.
There'd be some slight modifications to the design, but it wouldn't change the major design elements of it.
But it would,
Minor modifications.
Frank?
Councilman Cruz, sorry, I cut you off.
That's fine. That's essentially what I was going to say. It sure looked like to me that either one-way or two-way, the bus and parent drop-off would work fine.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilman Dundee.
That was really my only.
My question is, there's diagonal parking here, which you wouldn't need, and that would waste space if it was kept a one-way. So that wouldn't actually work for both directions.
The proposed site layout, should you bring it up on the screen, David, is the most recent one that was brought forth in August. Does not have angled parking. That was
Okay.
original concept in
So the one that we
January.
have, isn't it? This is January?
The one that shows the angled parking, that was the
It's
original
January.
concept that was brought forward back in January of this year.
A quick question. How many parking spots do these lanes give us? I think 16. Is that what I'm seeing? Or 17?
It's, please repeat that, Councilman.
He asked how many parking spaces the lane would give us, because wouldn't the school drop-off lane, the student drop-off lane serve as parking? It could possibly serve as
It
parking.
looks like
Yes.
11 from what I could see on one of them and 6 on the other. It was kind of hard to read the green print in there.
It's hard to read in there, but it shows 11 on Washington Street in the parent drop-off zone, and potentially, I believe, around 6 in where the bus loading zone would be on 7th.
That's correct.
Well, you mean on non-school days?
Yeah, in our conversation with the church and the school, you know, depending on the activity and the day of the week, that maybe on Sundays, that the buses could be relocated in the back of the school site there, and then that would allow some parking along 7th. So we've been working with them on some of those details on how they would like it signed.
Councilman Hardy.
My microphone bit me. I think I'm ready to call the question on this if there's no other things. I think that the improvements to the school drop-off and the bus drop-off are definitely positive, so.
Question has been called. All in favor of the first motion, which I don't have in front of me?
Motion to approve the design of the school layout, correct?
Yeah. Yes. We have that motion in a second. Ready to vote. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Okay. Is there a motion for the second item?
I'll make that motion.
So move.
I have a motion and a second. Any other conversation?
Just one quick question on this one. I know that there's a light it's currently there, and it's timed. And so these stop signs that we would put in, they'd be solar. They'd have solar panel chargers for the LEDs, which would be timed to be flashing on the weekday. How long would they be flashing? When will we be running the flashing lights?
We would work with the school, we would work with the church to determine what those timeframes would be, because we can really time them however we want. They could be timed for, 15 minutes, they could be timed for 2 hours. It's just a matter of working with the school and the church and determining what their best schedule is and how to time those accurately. And once they're timed, they can be re-timed, they can be adjusted, and as we go along.
What, and the light there, what would we do with that light? I guess my question would be, can we repurpose that light? Can we reuse it somewhere else, or?
So that light, as it currently stands, is out of current specifications, and I don't believe that we would be able to reuse that anywhere just because it doesn't meet current specifications.
Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thanks.
Yes, sir.
Tom Haggerty worked hard to get those lights down there to make it safer for the kids, and I believe those lights are much safer than just having one stop sign out in the middle, because you can change the times of the stop lights. And the whole priority of this is to keep those kids safe when they cut across the street. And they cut across the street on Mass Day 700 times. It's insane. I'm in favor of keeping or buying new traffic lights and have them there. A stop sign isn't nearly as good as a light you could flash, a light you could do all kinds of stuff, and you can change the timing on that. So I'm 100% to keep a stoplight there. And this stop sign is just a stop sign. And the lights would be much better, and that's the way it is. And
Okay, we have a motion.
school wanted that, and we got it for them, and it actually came out of North Cedar, I believe, didn't it? Didn't it come from the school out there, those street lights? I think they did.
I think it was on right in front of Casey's, and
On
they're
Center
the ones
Street?
that, yeah, the Tom
thought it
Haggerty had
was.
worked on.
Did you have another comment, Susan?
Yeah, I had a question. The school or the church, what did they want? Did they want the stoplight, or did they want the stop sign?
Well, when we started working with them and presented several different options with them, and, this was one of the options, they were very pleased with how this looked to them and how they thought it would function, how we believe it'll function for them.
You mean with the stop sign or just with the general road layout?
Well,
Or both?
in particular, the whole intersection design with the bump outs and the crosswalks and the always, flashing LED stop signs. They did give us our support.
We have a letter from the July that they're supportive of the stop sign, as well as I have an email last week from Father at the church there that both parties feel that the safest option is the stop sign. There are some instances in a stoplight that it becomes unsafe. And David, can you bring up one of those photos? Just so happens to be that, Google Earth only drives around the city maybe every 3 to 5 years, and in a specific instance, they could catch an image of, that there's pedestrians in the crosswalk and the light's green. So I mean, there's motorists. Obviously that would continue in this situation, but with a stop sign, it eliminates that factor of whether a student or a child does not push the button, so happens to not push it, and or is in the middle of the crosswalk when the light cycle switches.
Basically, it makes everybody stop regardless.
Correct.
Can
All
I,
right.
Councilman Miller?
I just wanted to reiterate, I think we've all got our own personal opinions about what works and what doesn't, but we're trusting you guys with facts and data and state guidelines that we have to meet for all of our intersections, correct? And if a stoplight's out of date, then we have to do something different. Isn't that how that works? There's repercussions?
We would have some significant improvements to bring them up to compliance, yes.
Right.
Councilman Cruz? We need to get moving here.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I look at the stop lights as being taller and more visible than a stop sign that could be hidden by a delivery vehicle or a panel truck and that sort of thing. And I know the controllers on a stop light can be set to be longer to accommodate slow-moving kids going across the street. So I'd be in favor of keeping the lights there, particularly if it save money. I don't know that we would have to change those. I'd be in favor of keeping the lights myself.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor of approving recommendation number 2 of converting the intersection from lights to flashing red stop sign, 4-way signs? All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
I think we have 5 ayes and 2 nays. And then need a motion on the final
I make a
recommendation.
motion for number 3 to approve Washington Street conversion as proposed tonight, which is 2A.
There's a motion to approve Washington Street proposal. Is there a second?
Second.
So motion and a second. All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
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 Did we?
You want to do a
3,
show
4.
of hands?
Yeah, let's have a show of hands.
Of the
All in
yeses or
favor?
noes?
For the yeses?
Okay. Opposed? Okay. That motion fails.
So it's kept one way.
Thank you, Dave, for your work.
Could I say a few things, Frank, just,
Yeah, sure,
just
Chase.
so everyone's on the same page? So staff's going to continue with the final design, incorporating items from number 1 and 2. Number 3, they will proceed with the design as a one-way street, and the next time that you'll see this project is in plan form at PS&E when we bring plans and specs forward, which will likely be early next year, maybe February timeframe.
Thanks, Chase.
All right, thank you.
Second item on our agenda tonight is the nutrient reduction strategy. No motions are necessary, I guess. So who's doing our presentation here?
I can take that,
Chase?
Mr. Dara. I wanted to start off here with a brief intro before I turn it over to our consultant for this project, in which they'll bring up the presentation here in a minute. To give you a brief history on our nutrient reduction plan for our water reclamation facility, back in 2012, the DNR came out with requirements for municipalities, treatment facility sites to manage their effluent or their water that discharges into the river after treatment, with a specific focus on two nutrients, which would be the nitrogen and phosphorus, in which throughout this presentation you may hear our consultant or myself reference the 10-in-1 guidelines, which basically means that the new requirements that the DNR will enforce here in the upcoming future would be that you're allowed to have 10 milligrams per liter of nitrogen and 1 milligram of phosphorus. And that's, again, after our treatment process as it's being discharged into the waters of the U.S. So, again, the initial report was required back in 2012. They mandated that each municipality have a strategy in place to meet those requirements. In 2016 was the actual first year that our report was submitted to the DNR and approved. As part of that report, it outlined that the city would look into efforts of regionalization as part of their nutrient reduction strategy. So when our permit expired and we renewed our permit in 2018, the DNR asked us to update our nutrient reduction strategy from 2016. So earlier this year, we worked with the consultant Black & Veatch to develop a scope to update our plan. We're kind of under a timeline with the DNR that these updates have to be in place next year in 2021. And, you know, from our report in 2016, the biggest thing that sticks out that I think is great information for all of you is that our treatment facility is operating very good right now, and I think Mike Nyman can attest to this, but we kind of have outdated technology of a trickling filter. You know, we're one of very few, and you can see it in the image that's on the screen right now. The lower left picture is actually a trickling filter, but they're not as good as at removing the nutrients to a level that the DNR will soon be requiring. So as part of our strategy, obviously, regardless of the direction we go, the trickling filters are no longer going to be able to accommodate for those limits in the future. So I think at that point, I'll turn it over to our consultant, which is Black & Veatch, and we have with us tonight Susie Carpenter, and she's going to be going through kind of the update of what they looked at and kind of three different scenarios that they looked at as part of our update to our strategy that will need to be submitted to the DNR later next year.
All right, thanks, Chase. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Sure can.
All right, so good evening. In the we looked at different options. We did the facility assessment to look at your existing plant. We also looked at options for the new treatment, regionalization, greenfield plant, or modification of the plant. And then with that, we also looked at comparison. Are you guys getting an echo on my end?
Yes.
You're cutting out a little bit.
I'm going to switch it up to my headset here. In fact. Better?
So far.
Okay. All right, so let's talk about the facility condition assessment. So the good news is that we did a condition assessment for your entire facility, and it's in good condition. It's important to remember that with any treatment plant option, you're going to need to be doing equipment repairs, replacement over time to keep that facility operating at its best. So we looked at each area and the useful life of equipment, the age of it, and made some recommendations on improvements that would be needed over time. So one thing that we did note is your existing digester control building will need to be updated to meet current codes for the long-term usage. So for the treatment options, the first one we looked at was regionalization with Waterloo. So what I'm showing here is your existing plant site, and the areas outlined in red would be facilities that would need to remain even if you went to a regionalization option. This is because you need to convey the wastewater from the downtown location to the Waterloo plant. This option includes demoing the existing facilities that are no longer needed, maintaining the facilities that are shown, constructing a new pump station, and new pipelines to get it to Waterloo. We've looked at this. It would be about 5.8 miles of force main to get to the connection with Waterloo. And that would be a dual force main, meaning you'd have one in use and as a backup if you ever needed to repeat it. So another thing to keep in mind is although you can demo out a lot of the facilities, you still need to maintain the drive off of 4th Street to get into the plant to the facilities that remain. So this alignment is showing you how you would get from downtown to Waterloo. The red line is what was looked at in the original regionalization study done by others. And then as we looked at it, we refined that, which is what what's showing up in green, to get out of floodplains or to consider railroad crossings and right-of-ways. So as we looked at costs, we did consider that. This is the estimated project cost for regionalization. This includes a pump station, the demolition of the existing plant that's no longer needed, and then the dual force main. There are costs that are not included, such as the land acquisition for that force main alignment, a potential buy-in to the Waterloo treatment plant, and also the cost for the upgrades for that nutrient removal that would also be needed at this plant. And then a full condition assessment to determine what other equipment will need to be upgraded. So this option is about $110 million for the full project cost.
Can I ask a question real quick before we go on?
Can we ask
Sure.
a couple questions then? Okay, Councilman Harding?
Can you go back one slide? Thanks. Do we have, all right, so 110, do we have any idea what the additional costs that are not yet quantified, what they could even possibly end up being?
At this time, we don't have an accurate number for that, but I can tell you that they could be fairly significant with, as I mentioned, all communities are required to have a nutrient reduction strategy. So Waterloo's plant is also going to have that strategy and have significant costs of improvements in which Cedar Falls would be buying into those improvements as well. And then obviously the asset of the treatment facility over there, Cedar Falls would be buying into a portion of that facility. So those costs could get fairly significant, but to have an accurate number for that, we don't have that at this time.
That's fair enough. So at 110 million, we still would have at least we're figuring a significant cost above that. More than likely.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
But the 110 is our minimum? Is that right?
Well, it's got to be at least
Yes.
more than that because we'll have to buy in to Waterloo and if we have to upgrade theirs. So, yeah.
And then we have no control over the costs there.
Okay.
They'll be able to dictate to us what they're going to charge us for sewage rates. So,
Any other comments at this point?
If I may,
Yes, please.
where are the conversations at with Waterloo and regionalization at this point? I mean, this is kind of for Cedar Falls in general, but we haven't really heard where that conversation's at.
I believe we've had approximately 3 meetings with local jurisdictions, including Evansdale and Hudson, Elk Run Heights. Since those conversations, I know that most of the communities are not pursuing regionalization at this time. We're still working with Waterloo to answer some of these unknowns in which Mr. Harding was asking about some of those unknown costs. We're still trying to work through those, which will require additional studies and facility assessments for Waterloo's treatment facility. So we're still meeting and keeping open communication with them and trying to gather a lot more of that information.
Chase or somebody have a question?
Do you have a question, Mr.?
Yeah. If we go the upgrade route, which I guess we're going to get to eventually here, or even regionalization, do we have a time frame that our current facilities would work, or is that coming in the presentation? Are we talking 20 years, 30 years, 50 years? I'd be interested in that part.
that kind of gets into the details of the facility condition assessment. And our report that we have from Black and Veatch will outline different pieces of equipment and their anticipated lifespan that's remaining. You know, some pieces of equipment like the trickling filters may have 10 to 15 years left, and those types of things. But I think the goal out of tonight, just to give you a little bit of direction, is to give you a lot of this information in regards to our nutrient reduction strategy and working with the DNR and having a clear direction on where Cedar Falls is moving. And then at goal setting here in the next couple weeks, we'll have a conversation in regards to this, but we wanted to get a lot of this information out to you now so you can be able to look through that.
Thank you, Chase, and I appreciate you kind of bringing us back to task. This is just informational. We know this is a huge commitment. There's a lot of politics with it as well as expense, and I think tonight's purpose is just to give us some baseline information, and the hard conversations will be ahead of us. So, but I do want to keep a track of the time so we can get our regular meeting started on time. So, back to the presentation.
Okay. One thing I didn't mention is that these are 2019 costs. I'm getting that echo again. I apologize.
Cost went down in
Okay, so
2020, right?
oh, I'm sorry, I didn't catch that.
Go right ahead. You're fine.
Okay. The next option we looked at is a greenfield site. So with the greenfield, this is a brand new treatment facility constructed on a different site, different than where you're at right now. So the term greenfield is just a brand new facility. So with the greenfield facility, you have similar needs with your existing site. You need to be able to move the wastewater from the downtown area to the new site. So we would still need to have that equalization basin, an operation building, a pump station, and then the new pipeline. As far as where that would go, we made the assumption that it'd be a similar pipeline length to what we were looking at for the regionalization option for our pricing. So with the greenfield, the advantages, you get to have a brand new treatment plant, brand new treatment facilities. You get to design it to state of the art, but there are some things that need to be taken into account. The location is not yet known, so we've assumed it's about a 35-acre site. It's possible that the effluent limits would be different and maybe even more stringent than what you're looking at for your current plant, depending on what way it discharges into. And then there could be some cost savings as you look at alternate technologies if this is the way that the city chose to go. So looking at the costs themselves, again, we have the demolition and the cost for conveyance the same as what we would have if we were to go to the regionalization option. There are some costs that we can't yet quantify because there are some unknowns, such as the cost of acquiring that 35 acres and the easements to get that pipeline to where it needs to go. There would be utility needs. You need power, gas, telecom to the new plant, working with IDNR on permitting fees and any water quality monitoring, and then the potential cost for the pipeline to get from the plant to that waterway. Without knowing the site, we couldn't quantify that distance, but the cost of the knowns would be about $274 million. Okay. I'll keep moving, and we can always come back if you guys have some questions that come up. So then the last option that we looked at was modification of the existing water reclamation facility. I did want to back up for 1 minute. We looked at projections to make sure that what we were designing would get you through long term. So we looked at flows through 2049 based on population projections. What this graphic is showing you is that when the 2016 report was done, census data was utilized to project what the population and then with that what the flows would be. When we revisited it, we noted that the Blackhawk MPO projections were a little bit lower. So we're looking at a similar sized facility as what was considered in 2016. We did look again at technologies that are available to meet these new nutrient limits that are coming from IDNR, and there are several technologies that could be considered. We narrowed it down to 3 that are within about 10% of the capital cost, and also looked at O&M. We settled on a conventional treatment process, but there are some innovative technologies that could be considered as you're looking at designing the facility. So this is what the site would look like with those recommended improvements. There's new concrete basins needed for that new treatment technology. We are recommending upgrading the digesters, installing some odor control, and then this Headworks building that you see over to the left of the screen, that's where the flow initially comes into the treatment facility. It has bar screens to collect any trash. You do have a Headworks facility on site, but that's one of the first facilities that's really going to age out, and we would recommend building a newer facility designed for the flows and designed for access, a little bit different than what you have now. So we started looking at a phasing plan to allow for these upgrades to be implemented over time instead of all at once. The color coding here, you can see the darker blue is the first phase. Those are the digester improvements. Those need to be done first just because of the age of the infrastructure. And we would also recommend looking at odor control as part of that to keep your plant downtown. Then we have the first train of the biological nutrient removal, which is the treatment that's needed to replace your current technologies. And that would be followed by a second train. And then that new Headworks building would be phase 4. And those trickling filters that Chase talked about would eventually be demoed out. But what we're doing with this phasing is taking advantage of the fact that those do work for the treatment that you need, and we can look at an implementation plan. So this just shows you how that phasing would work in order to meet the upcoming nitrogen and phosphorus limits. So what's critical to note here is that eventually you'll need to get to a 10-in-1 limit that Chase mentioned. Your current treatment plant can get to about 22-in-3. So you'll need to start looking at phasing. And there are communities in Iowa that have done an implementation plan similar to what we're proposing that's been, or have presented a plan to IDNR that's been approved. So this is something worth asking them about if you want to consider looking at not spending the money all at once. So this is the cost breakdown if we were to modify the existing water reclamation facility. We broke it out to show that the first 3 phases are about a $64 million investment, and then the total investment is $97 million, again, based on 2019 dollars and over time.
Mayor?
So,
Excuse me, we've got a question here. Mr. Miller?
Does this do away with the odor problems downtown? I mean, the trickling stations, I believe, are where that's happening. Is that accurate?
I believe some of the odor comes from different facilities, whether it's Headworks or the digesters, but obviously we can help improve the odor by having some odor control, in which we've included as part of phase 1. But obviously you won't completely eliminate it at certain times. I mean, you can modify the plant to have some control over it, but it won't completely eliminate it.
Yeah. Thank you.
Question then, if I may, on the phases, what time frame are we talking here? A couple of years or?
So the DNRs require an update to our 2016 plan. As part of our update, we have to include kind of when it is anticipated that we will meet their requirements of the 10-in-1 for the nitrogen and phosphorus. So They haven't set a sunset date for communities to, for example, to begin construction by 2025. But I know that they've been open to communities that have older technologies like Cedar Falls and the trickling filters. It is a significant cost to convert over to a newer technology, and they've been open to longer phasing plans in that regard.
So as far as us raising the money, it would be over the course of at least 5 years, or are you saying maybe 10, or just kind of a ballpark, I'm wondering?
I know that Director Rodenbeck and myself have discussed some of the cost and the options presented tonight, but right now I don't have an accurate number on kind of the payback time or what this would exactly do to rates. As we get further along in the process and we get a more accurate number and the timeline of when we will start implementing those improvements or begin construction, we could get a better idea of those numbers.
I think the early answer, or the easy answer to that is we don't know. Until we start submitting information to the DNR and working on what that timing will be, when the improvements have to be in place, we won't know that until then.
But if we have to do something sooner than later, we could bond for it and have rates adjusted and back over 10, 15 years? Is that?
Oh, you're going to have
What
to
would
bond
happen?
for it. I mean, you're talking about $100 million. It's not, it's going to be a significant
Oh.
investment. So,
I was wondering if it's over the course of 10, 15 years, and you wouldn't bond as much, but yeah, okay.
Also, I guess I'm kind of curious about advantages of regionalization versus doing our own. I know there's been a group for a number of years looking at that. What's the status there? Have we had much involvement with the larger discussion?
Yeah, as Mr. Miller referenced about our meetings with other jurisdictions in Waterloo specifically is, we've gotten quite a bit of information about other communities in Iowa, which are very few that have a regionalized structure, and each one of them have kind of a different layout of contractually how that operates. But the long-term advantages there's long-term advantages with regionalization. That's not something you'll see in the next 10 years. It may be something you'll see 40 to 50 years down the road as it relates to assets of the facility in general. But there are some things with regionalization that you kind of lose control with, and they're no longer your facility or asset.
Are there any environmental advantages to a regional facility versus every town having their own?
I can't specifically speak to that, no.
Can I ask the consultant a question?
Yes, go right ahead.
If we upgrade the system or the plant and we do phase 1, 2, 3, let's just say we upgrade the whole thing, how much life does that give us in the future as compared to if we built a new state-of-the-art one, for example? What's the difference in lifespan?
So we would typically say that these plants are going to have a lifespan of 20 years. And it would be the same if you upgrade or if you build new. You're going to have maintenance costs and equipment replacement costs over time. You will, obviously, when you're working with the existing plant, some of those costs are going to come sooner than a new facility, but the facilities themselves will be sized and designed for that 20 to 30-year lifespan.
Okay, thanks.
Are there comments or questions from council?
Do we have some more slides? Or is there more?
Yeah, I have a couple more slides. So this is a cost comparison of the three options that we looked at. Just a quick refresher with the regionalization. This is including the pump station, the dual pipeline, and demo of the facilities that are no longer needed at your existing site. And there are costs that are not quantified, such as easements and the cost for buy-in to that regionalized facility. That was a $110 million plus cost. The Greenfield is the brand new facility located on a 35-acre site somewhere near the city limits or within the city limits. So that is the cost of a brand new facility and includes the cost for the pump station and conveyance. And there are also some costs that are unidentified there, such as the land acquisition. And then the modification of your existing facility was the $97 million cost, which could be phased if approved by IDNR. And that is our last slide if you have any additional questions.
I have a quick question. Do we have an idea of the maximum population we could cover with our current plant when it's upgraded and modified? Can we double? I know that there was a projection in there, but what is the absolute max? Do you have an idea?
I don't have that handy, but let me see if I can find it.
I guess I was wondering, at some point, if we grow south of town any extensive amount, that part of the town could go in one direction, possibly. I mean, we don't have to have everything go to one plant. I don't know if that's done in any other communities that you consult in or not.
Susie, could you go back? Could you go back to slide 32? To answer your question, Councilman Cruz, is that if we remain in place with modifications to the existing plant, there are old facilities that could be demoed that would open up space for additional infrastructure to increase our capacity. So the projected numbers in the graph that Susie showed before, projected populations for a design year, would be based on the modifications to the existing plant as she's got on the screen right now. Go back to the phasing diagram there. All the hatched, the white, red hatched area would be demoed facility that would open up the site for potential infrastructure in the future to increase capacity.
So this is probably a dumb question, but the two green circles are replaced with 6 hashtag, I guess you'd say, or is it just a totally different type of system?
Yeah, so the large green circles are your primary clarifiers. It's a different part of the plant.
Okay, so comparing circles isn't very accurate.
The mainstream method of treatment is drastically changing, but there are elements in our existing facility that will still be in the new modified facility.
Okay.
And to answer your question, the population was just over 51,000 for 2049, which is the design year we looked at.
Okay. So if we grew to say 100,000, 40 years or whatever, it looks like our site here, based on the demoing, we'd have a lot of room to continue to expand.
Yeah, there would be potential for expansion.
Okay. No more questions.
Chase, you mentioned goal setting. I guess my question is, what do we do from here? As this is the first time I think we've really had a good discussion about this. And I know it's going to be a long-term thing, but hopefully we'll keep this on the top of our list for ongoing discussion and planning. And I still like to entertain a regional idea as well, but what do you see happening at goal set? What do we need to do at goal setting?
So obviously, this will be a big topic at goal setting, in the fact that, as part of our update to the DNR that we'll need to submit next year, and obviously that will need to be approved by them, we'll need to have a clear direction to them on when will we meet those requirements and what method will that be. As an example, whether it's regionalization or if Cedar Falls plans to remain in place and modify their existing facility, that all needs to be outlined in the report, and then that will require DNR approval, and we can begin that process of starting to look at the phasing and implementation of those items.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
The one thing I would like to say is when you talk about regionalization, Cedar Falls mostly has residential wastewater that we treat. When we start going and getting in to bed with Waterloo has a completely different kind of industrial base, and they actually have digesters out near IBP in those places, and they deal with super heavy-duty waste, and it's a completely different ball game. We're better off to treat our own residential waste and let them worry about their side of it, because they pick up a bigger profit with commercial business where we don't have that. That's all. I just wanted to pop that in there.
It's always good to see what the benefits or downsides are. Any other questions or comments?
One last question.
Yes, sir.
When is staff going to be looking for council to give them a direction on which way we want to go? At goal setting, or are we going to set another meeting? Just curious.
That would be the hope, that at goal setting that we could get a clear idea on what to communicate to the DNR is how to meet their limits.
Is there a way to get any more information on a regionalization? Is there going to be a meeting before goal setting, or a way to get some more information on the benefits and what Waterloo could offer possibly?
We're continuing the communication with Waterloo, and actually we have an additional meeting, I believe, this week. But obviously, some of that information is going to be lengthy to get from. There will need to be facility assessment at the Waterloo plant. Just for reference, Veenstra and Kim, another consulting company, came and spoke about a big regionalization facility in the Des Moines metro area, and their facility and planning took over 6 years to be able to get some of those numbers that won't come until year 5. They won't have those types of numbers. So there's a lot of unknowns that will likely take quite a bit of time to get a more exact number. But in hopes that we're trying to get some of that information prior to goal setting. Obviously, we won't have near all of it.
Thanks.
So it sounds, if we're understanding that right, the timeline for the permit is pretty well going to drive what we need to do, aside from regionalization.
The permit is, the update to our strategy to meet those requirements is due in calendar year 21.
Yeah. Any other comments or questions? Thank you so much. It's not necessarily information we want to hear, but it's something we need, and it was very nicely done. So thank you. I think we're done
Thank you.
for now. I don't know that we even need a motion. We're done. We'll be back here in 25 minutes.
Thanks.
Thanks, Susie.